poor thing has had his fair share of legal troubles, which naturally strained his already complicated relationship with his father. Back in September 2022, he dropped this bombshell on Instagram about getting arrested. Of course, he kept the nitty-gritty details under wraps, but darling, you should have seen how the internet exploded. Everyone and their mother started pointing fingers at T.I., essentially questioning his parenting skills and blaming him for King's behavior.
Ladies and gentlemen, BuzzBuster is happy to see you again. Smash that subscribe button and let's start. On August 25th, 2004, Clifford Joseph King Harris III entered the world already tied to a name people across music knew well. He was born into a household shaped by fame, success, and constant attention. With a father recognized as one of rap's biggest stars and a mother celebrated as an R&B standout, King Harris was introduced to the public almost as soon as he arrived. For many viewers, he wasn't just a child in a famous family. He became part of a story they felt they were watching in real time. Atlanta, Georgia is where that story began. King was born to rapper T.I. and singer Tamika Cottle, better known as Tiny. At the time, his father, Clifford Joseph Harris Jr., was rapidly becoming one of the most influential figures in Southern hip-hop.
And this is the part that got me. Trees don't hang around with the grass, even though they all started from the same place.
His rise was impossible to ignore. T.I. built his reputation through a style and sound that helped define an entire movement, and he is widely recognized as one of the artists who helped establish trap music, alongside fellow Georgia rappers Jeezy and Gucci Mane. His mother had her own major legacy. Tiny was a founding member of Escape, the multi-platinum R&B group that left a lasting mark on the genre. Her voice, her image, and her success gave her a place in music history long before reality television made the family even more visible. Put those two careers together, and King was born into a household that carried serious cultural weight. This was not just celebrity. This was a family with deep roots in music, influence, and public attention.
Even his name reflected that legacy. He was literally named after his father, carrying the full legal name forward as Clifford Joseph King Harris III. That alone said a lot about expectations, image, and identity. From the very beginning, there was a sense that he represented continuation, almost like he had been assigned a role before he was old enough to understand it. In a family already viewed as music royalty, King was seen as the next generation, the child growing up under a spotlight he never asked for. That kind of attention can look glamorous from the outside. To the public, it often seems like a dream life. Big names, famous parents, television appearances, and constant visibility can create the impression that everything is handed to you. Yet, growing up in that kind of environment can be far more complicated than it appears. Public fascination does not create stability. Cameras may document a childhood, but they do not provide guidance, privacy, or normalcy. Being watched is not the same as being protected. King's early life unfolded in a household the public felt connected to, especially as reality television brought viewers deeper into the family's day-to-day world. Audiences didn't just know his parents as recording artists, they knew them as personalities, as public figures, and as the center of a home life that was turned into entertainment. That level of exposure changes things. It means childhood memories are no longer private family moments. They become content.
You know, hey man, I like Snapchat. Y'all know what you should do, right?
I'm with the two of the little baddest little mother that you could ever
Yeah, you
find.
can call it. We already heard you in your videos. Listen.
They become scenes. They become part of a public image that can follow a person for years.
For a child, that kind of visibility can create a strange divide. On one side, there is the real person, still growing, still learning, still figuring things out. On the other side, there is the version the public thinks it knows. When those two things do not match, pressure starts to build. Expectations come from everywhere. Fans form opinions early. Critics do the same. The child is left to navigate an identity already shaped by headlines, reputation, and the powerful shadow of his parents' names. That shadow, in King's case, was enormous. T.I. was not simply a successful rapper. He was one of the defining names of his era, especially in Southern hip-hop. Tiny was not just a singer with a few credits. She came from a group with major commercial success and lasting respect in R&B. Together, they formed one of the most recognizable celebrity couples in music culture. Their family became part of the broader entertainment landscape, which meant King was never just growing up at home in the ordinary sense. He was growing up in front of an audience.
Do your family, and especially King, do they know what you mean to the genre and who you are?
I mean, man, I think they do.
Okay.
I think they do. I feel like it's a little, I think it's kind of overwhelming.
There is also something especially difficult about inheriting fame instead of building it yourself. Chosen success brings one kind of pressure. Borrowed attention brings another. King did not step into the public eye because he released an album, launched a career, or asked to be judged on his own terms. He was noticed because of who his parents were. Before he had the chance to define himself, much of the world had already decided what he represented. That can twist the normal process of growing up. Most children get to make mistakes in private, change over time, and discover who they are without every phase being discussed by strangers. A child from a famous family often loses that luxury. Every moment can feel magnified. Every change can be interpreted. Every action can be linked back to the family name. In that environment, even ordinary struggles can start to look larger than they really are.
So when people ask how King Harris ended up where he did, the answer does not begin with one moment. It starts at birth, inside a family with immense visibility, influence, and expectation. It starts with a name that carried history. It starts in Atlanta, in a household led by T.I. and Tiny, two major figures in music. Most of all, it starts with the reality that fame can shape a life long before that person has any say in it. King Harris was born into privilege, recognition, and legacy. He was also born into pressure, scrutiny, and an identity already half-written by the time he could speak. That combination is where this story begins. King Harris wasn't raised by ordinary parents who just happened to be well-known. He was raised by two major stars whose calendars were constantly packed.
So I was raised with my grandma. I lived with my grandma. She had a great house, but in a bad area.
That much I manipulate the lines at the time.
If anybody knows Terra Boulevard, Flint River, okay, Clayco, that's where I'm from.
Their lives moved at full speed all year long, with tours rolling into recording sessions, studio time turning into interviews, and media appearances leading straight to movie work. In a lifestyle like that, family time can easily become the first thing that slips away. Because of that nonstop schedule, the children were often around their grandmother more than they were around either parent. That says a lot about the environment King grew up in. Fame was not something that sat on the edge of the household. It was woven into daily life. He came up in a big, blended family, surrounded by siblings and half-siblings, including Zonique Pullins, Messiah Damon, and Deja. Several of them would also find their way into music and entertainment, making the family name even more connected to the spotlight. Home was busy, loud, and full of movement. There were always people around, always something happening, always energy in the room. Still, one detail stands out above everything else. Cameras were part of that home too.
That matters more than most people understand. A crowded house is one thing. A crowded house being filmed is something completely different. Once cameras enter a family's everyday world, even ordinary moments can start to feel like scenes. Privacy changes, childhood changes. The way people interact can change too, especially when millions of strangers are eventually invited to watch.
By the time King's crusty ass came out, T.I. was already rich, and we all got to watch the kids grow up on television, so I'm just fucking confused. Take his ass out, cut off all the funds, he ain't gonna have nothing else to do. You wanna see what roaches look like? Go see, hang out with the roaches.
In 2011, VH1 launched the reality series T.I. and Tiny, The Family Hustle. The show ran for 6 seasons and was marketed as a close-up look at the home life of T.I. and Tiny while they balanced parenting with demanding careers. Viewers were invited in to see the family behind the celebrity image, to watch how they handled work, relationships, and raising children under pressure. For the audience, it may have felt entertaining, warm, and personal. For King, it meant something very different. He was only 7 years old when filming began, At that age, a child does not fully understand what it means to have personal moments recorded and packaged for television. He wasn't someone who chose this path after thinking it through. There was no real decision for him to make. He did not try out for the role. He did not negotiate terms. He did not willingly step into fame as an informed participant. He was simply a little boy born into a household that chose to put its everyday life on display for a massive audience. That distinction changes how everything should be viewed. From the outside, reality television can look harmless, even glamorous. It can seem like an exciting opportunity, especially when the family at the center is already famous. Yet for a child, the experience is far more complicated. Growing up is already confusing enough without the added pressure of public attention. Every awkward phase, every childish reaction, every family dynamic can become part of a larger story shaped by editing, promotion, and audience opinion.
King didn't enter that environment as a public figure with a carefully built image. He entered it as a child, living his normal life while adults made decisions around him. The cameras arrived, and suddenly, the space where he was supposed to grow up became content. That is the part many people miss. When viewers watch a reality show, they often feel like they know the family. They see meals, jokes, disagreements, celebrations, and routines, and it creates the illusion of full access. However, what they are really seeing is a version of real life filtered through television. For children on those shows, that can mean growing up with two realities at once: the private family experience and the public version consumed by strangers. In King's case, those two worlds were introduced early. Before he was old enough to fully process what fame could do, he was already living inside it. Not on the sidelines, not in the background, right in the middle of it. That kind of upbringing leaves a mark. When a child is surrounded by celebrity, raised in a high-profile blended family, and filmed during formative years, the result is not just an unusual childhood. It is a childhood shaped by performance, schedule, exposure, and public attention from the beginning.
So, let the world know about you for people that don't know who you are.
What I like to tell people is I'm the ugliest motherfucker in this world. What that make you?
Everything around him was amplified. The household was big. The personalities were big. The careers were big. Even the family moments were big because they were being presented to viewers as part of a show. What might have been simple memories for another child became televised moments attached to a public identity. So when people try to understand King Harris, this context cannot be ignored. He didn't just grow up around fame. He grew up inside a machine built from fame, entertainment, and non-stop visibility. The people raising him were balancing enormous careers. The family around him was deeply connected to the industry. The home itself became a set. Once you understand that, the story starts to look very different. This wasn't only about having celebrity parents. It was about being a child in a household where the spotlight never fully turned off. It was about learning who you are while the world is already watching. And it all started when he was just 7 years old, long before he had any say in how much of his life would belong to the public. The way people viewed King Harris may have been shaped by television, but years later, he offered a very different version of that story. During a 2023 appearance on Funny Marco's Open Thoughts, King said the life shown on screen didn't truly reflect how he was actually living. According to him, he was staying at his grandmother's home during that period, not in the polished family setting viewers were led to believe was everyday reality. He explained that his parents' house was mostly where he went when it was time to film. In other words, the mansion, the sit-down meals, and the image of one tightly connected household were not, in his telling, the full picture. Those scenes existed for the production. Once filming ended and the cameras were gone, King said he returned to his grandmother's place. That detail stands out because it wasn't presented like an offhand remark or a vague memory. It directly challenged the public image built around the family at the time. For viewers, the show sold a warm and unified home life, complete with structure, closeness, and constant interaction. King's later comments suggested something far more complicated behind the scenes. What makes it even more interesting is that the series itself appeared to quietly acknowledge part of that arrangement. In a VH1 episode description, the network noted that King, the son of T.I. and Tiny, had been staying with his grandmother and that she had been spoiling him heavily. The description went on to say that when it was time for him to return home, T.I. and Tiny had to figure out how to discipline their wild child. So even within the show's own promotional material, there was already a sign that King's living situation may not have matched the picture many viewers assumed.
I'm a grandma boy.
Man,
I like to be in the neighborhood.
Yep, I'm glad
with
you
the kids
I'm
outside.
glad you wanted to go over there.
Yeah.
You made it seem like we were sending you over there.
No.
You cried and cried and cried when you couldn't go over there.
You know what I'm saying?
You always say, King, stay home, stay home. Man, you would hold your breath, turn red in the face.
No.
That changes the way the show can be interpreted. What looked like a full-time family routine may have actually been a curated version of events, built around filming schedules and a camera-ready storyline. The image was neat, polished, and easy for audiences to follow. The reality, if King's account is taken at face value, sounds much less straightforward. His comments also don't exist in isolation. Another member of the family, his sister, T. Zonique Pullins, shared thoughts that pointed in a similar direction when discussing her own childhood experience. Zonique spoke candidly about her mother, Tiny, and said she didn't always feel her mom was as present as she wanted her to be growing up. She described that absence in emotional terms, saying what hurt her most was her mother being with Tip all the time. That statement paints a picture of the child who felt the balance of attention at home was not where she needed it to be. Rather than describing a fully available parent, Zonique seemed to be reflecting on a period where her mother's focus was elsewhere. She also said her parents were tied at the hip, suggesting they were constantly together. That kind of closeness between adults can look strong from the outside, but for children, it can sometimes create a very different experience. Zonique's words added another layer to the family story the public thought it knew.
Taken together, those remarks from both King and Zonique raised questions about how much of the family's image was reality and how much of it was performance for television. The audience saw a stylish household, memorable dinners, and a larger-than-life family dynamic. What these later comments hint at, however, is that some of the people inside that picture may have been experiencing something much more distant and uneven than viewers realized. That doesn't necessarily erase every genuine moment captured on camera. Reality television often includes real emotions, real relationships, and real conflict. Still, it also shapes stories into something easier to package. Scenes get organized, narratives get sharpened. Certain details become central, while others stay in the background. In this case, the background may have held much more than the audience ever knew. King's reflection matters because it came years after the show, when there was less reason to protect the original image. Looking back, he seemed to be separating the public version of his upbringing from the private one. That distinction is a powerful one, especially when someone grows up in front of viewers who think they understand the full story. Zonique's comments deepened that same theme. Her words didn't just speak to scheduling or who was physically where. They pointed to something more personal, the feeling of not getting the presence or connection she wanted from her mother during childhood. That kind of statement lands differently because it's not about appearances. It's about how life felt from inside the family. When you line up King's account with a VH1 episode description and then place Zonique's perspective alongside it, a more layered family portrait begins to emerge. The glossy version still existed, but underneath it were signs of separation, imbalance, and experiences that didn't fit the polished image.
Tiny finally confirmed what Atlanta's been whispering, that T.I.'s friendship with Shekinah Anderson went way too far. During a live, Tiny said she left her home over infidelities with a girl I hired, and fans instantly knew she was talking about Shekinah. But then Shekinah went live crying, claiming T.I. humiliated her on a flight, calling her the help.
For anyone reconsidering how they see King Harris now, that context matters. The person presented on television may have been shaped by circumstances viewers never fully understood. If he was moving between spaces, navigating family expectations, and appearing in a version of home life designed for an audience, then the story becomes less simple than it first appeared. The biggest takeaway is this: what millions of people watched may have been only one slice of reality. The cameras captured a version of family life that looked complete. Years later, King and Zonique both suggested there was much more going on than the audience was ever allowed to see. One parent stepped away, and the other was gone as well. The ones left to absorb that absence were the children. None of this is about painting T or Tiny as uncaring. By all visible accounts, they cared deeply about their kids. Still, caring for a child and actually being there every day are two very different things. Those are not the same experience in a young person's life. For King, that gap appears especially important. He was largely being brought up by his grandmother during years when television was presenting something much more polished. On screen, viewers were shown a family image that felt complete, steady, and connected. Off-screen, his day-to-day reality seems to have been far more complicated. Living inside that kind of split can leave a mark. It is one thing to miss a parent in private. It is something else entirely when millions of people think they know your family story because they watched an edited version of it on TV. That kind of mismatch can shape a child in quiet but powerful ways. A young boy starts to notice when the public version of his life does not line up with what he experiences at home. He sees what others believe. He feels what is actually happening. Over time, that distance between image and reality can become hard to ignore.
There is also another major part of the story, T.I.'s legal issues, which created long stretches where he simply was not around during some of the most important years of King's childhood. If you really want to make sense of King Harris, you have to look at the pattern of interruptions that repeatedly removed his father from the picture. It was not just one moment, it was a cycle. And those gaps happen during the exact period when children are building their earliest and strongest ideas about family, authority, and identity. In March 2009, T.I. received a sentence of 1 year and 1 day in prison as part of a plea agreement tied to federal weapons charges. At that time, Ting was only 4 years old. 4. That number matters more than it may seem. Age 4 is not some blurry stage a child simply forgets. It is a foundational period. A boy that young is beginning to form his most basic understanding of what a man looks like in a household. He is taking in what a father's role is supposed to be. He is learning, often without words, how the world works, what security feels like, and who is there when life is confusing. During that exact stage, his father was leaving a federal courtroom in a gray suit under official escort. That image says a lot, even without extra commentary. For the public, it became another headline in a celebrity legal saga.
I had guns in the car, machine guns and silencers in the car. I had a couple more handguns also in the car. When they went to my house and went in my closet and saw I had a vault full of more guns. And
that presented a bit of a problem.
For a child, however, it represented something much more personal. Another major disruption in the person he was supposed to be learning from most closely. Children do not process these events the way adults do. They do not sit down and sort through legal language, plea deals, or media narratives. They understand absence. They recognize routine being broken. They feel the instability when someone important disappears from daily life. Even if the adults around them try to shield them, kids still absorb the emotional reality of what is happening. In King's case, those early years seem to have unfolded under unusually complicated conditions. There was public visibility. There was family love. There was also separation, inconsistency, and the strange pressure of having outsiders believe they understood his home life because they had seen it packaged for entertainment. That matters. It matters because children are not raised by intentions alone. They are shaped by who is consistently present, who they can rely on, and what examples are repeated in front of them over time. A father can love his son deeply and still leave behind confusion if circumstances repeatedly pull him away. Both things can be true at once. This is where the story becomes less about blame and more about impact. The issue is not whether T loved King. The issue is what King experienced while growing up. Those are related questions, but they are not identical. A child responds to what he lives through, not just to what adults feel in their hearts. Meanwhile, the contrast between public perception and private experience only adds another layer. Viewers at home may have seen a recognizable family brand, complete with cameras, personalities, and a polished sense of togetherness. Yet for the child at the center of it, the reality may have included long absences, shifting responsibilities, and a grandmother taking on much of the day-to-day role. That kind of upbringing can create a complicated emotional map. On one side, there is admiration, love, and loyalty to family. On the other, there may be disappointment, confusion, or a struggle to reconcile what people assume with what actually happened. For a young boy, especially one growing up in a famous household, those contradictions can become part of his identity before he is even old enough to fully explain them.
Looking back at March 2009, the timing stands out. King was not a teenager.
He was not even old enough to fully grasp the legal system. He was at the very beginning, at the stage where stability and example matter immensely. Those years often become the blueprint for how a child views manhood, rules, discipline, and protection. So when trying to understand King Harris, that moment cannot be brushed aside as just another celebrity court case. In his life, it was one chapter in a larger pattern of absence during the years that shape a child the most. And the story does not start with scandal. It starts with a boy trying to make sense of the adults around him, while the world watched a version of family life that may not have reflected the one he was truly living. That background is essential. Without it, King's story risks being reduced to headlines and reactions. With it, a more human picture starts to come into focus. This was far more serious than a simple mix-up. Federal agents pulled T.I. into a sting operation after his own bodyguard began cooperating with investigators and delivered 3 machine guns and 2 silencers directly to him. Because of his prior felony conviction, T.I. was legally barred from possessing any firearms at all. That restriction traced back to 1998, when he was convicted on felony drug charges involving possession of crack cocaine with intent to distribute. By that point, trouble with the law was nothing new in his life. His involvement with the justice system had started early, long before fame, headlines, and success changed his public image. As a teenager, T.I. had already begun dealing drugs. Arrests followed quickly. By just 14 years old, he had already been taken into custody multiple times. Those early run-ins painted a picture of someone who had spent much of his youth caught in a cycle that kept pulling him back toward legal trouble.
Eventually, he served his sentence and returned home. For a moment, it may have looked like that chapter was over, yet the break did not last. Fewer than 6 months after being released, he was facing consequences again. In September 2010, authorities in Los Angeles arrested T.I. on drug-related charges after saying he was found with 4 ecstasy pills. The case led to another major setback. The following month, in October 2010, he was sentenced to 11 months in prison because the arrest violated his parole. For the adults involved, it was another legal crisis. For his son, it was another absence. By then, King was 6 years old and his father was leaving once more. During the short span between ages 4 and 7, King Harris saw his father go to prison twice. That is a heavy reality for any child to live through, especially during years that are supposed to feel stable, safe, and secure. The situation became even more difficult in September 2010 when T.I. and his wife, Tiny, were arrested on drug charges together. Both parents were taken into custody at the same time. For a young child, that kind of moment can be deeply unsettling. Even without fully understanding the details, a child can still feel the disruption, the uncertainty, and the sudden change in everyday life. Kids may be far too young to grasp court hearings, charges, or sentencing, yet they instantly recognize when something is wrong.
Right. I went to jail so they wouldn't.
Wow.
Motherfuckers who doing time right now.
Right. Real shit.
That know that. And also, it's motherfuckers who doing time right now know that I know some shit that I could have helped them get. You know what I mean? But I didn't.
What reaches them first is not the law. It is the emptiness. It is the disorder. It is the strain hanging in the air at home, the quiet conversations behind closed doors, the sudden way a grandmother pulls them close because she already senses what the family is about to face.
For a child, those moments leave a mark long before anyone explains what happened. They may not understand the paperwork or the headlines, but they can feel the shift in the room. They notice who is missing at dinner. They hear the silence after a tense phone call. They remember the look on the adults' faces when no one thinks they are paying attention. Those are the details that stay with a child for years. T has spoken about that chapter of his life with striking honesty and visible regret. In court in 2010, he did not try to dodge responsibility or soften what had happened. He told the judge plainly, "I screwed up. I screwed up big time, and I'm sorry." That kind of admission stood out because it was direct, unpolished, and deeply personal. He also made it clear that he wanted a different future, saying, "I don't want and I don't need to use drugs anymore. I want them out of my life." Those words mattered. They signaled someone looking directly at the consequences of his choices and deciding he could not continue down the same road. To his significant credit, he followed through. Prison did not become the rest of his story. Instead, he managed to change course. His career was rebuilt, his public image recovered. Over time, he stepped into roles that carried real weight, becoming both an activist and a mentor to others. From the outside, that kind of turnaround can look like a complete redemption arc. It is the version people like to celebrate: the mistake, the apology, the comeback, the reinvention. There is truth in that. His progress deserves recognition. He did what many fail to do. He pulled his life back together and created something meaningful out of a damaging period.
Still, another truth exists alongside that success, and it is much harder to talk about. Even when an adult turns everything around, a child may already have absorbed the consequences. By the time the comeback arrives, the early hurt has often settled in. In Atlanta, there was a little boy living through the years that shape a person most deeply, and much of that time was spent waiting for his father to return. That kind of waiting changes a child. It creates questions no one can answer easily. It teaches uncertainty at an age when stability is supposed to feel natural. Days turn into months, and the absence becomes part of the child's routine. Eventually, the missing parent is not just gone for a while. The absence starts to define the emotional rhythm of childhood itself. During that period, his grandmother stepped in and tried to carry what should never have been hers to carry alone. Love can do a great deal. Care can protect. Consistency can help hold a child together when everything else feels unsteady. Yet even the most devoted grandmother cannot fully replace what a father is meant to provide. She can comfort the pain, soften the blow, and keep the child grounded, but she cannot erase the empty space left behind. That is what makes situations like this so heartbreaking. The people around the child often do everything they can. They show up, they sacrifice, they pour in affection and support. Even so, the original loss still matters. The gap remains. No amount of love from others completely removes the ache of waiting for a parent who should be there. Across many families, a painful pattern appears again and again when a father moves in and out of incarceration. The impact rarely stops with one generation. Instead, it echoes. The son grows up watching instability become normal. He sees distance, disruption, and return, not as rare emergencies, but as part of life. Over time, that cycle can become familiar in dangerous ways. What makes this pattern so tragic is that imitation does not always come from admiration. It is often far more complicated than that. A son may not be trying to celebrate what took his father away. He may simply be repeating what was modeled for him, acting out pain he never learned how to name, or drifting toward the only version of manhood he has seen up close. Children study the adults around them constantly, even when no one realizes it. They pick up on habits, emotional responses, and the ways people cope with pressure. If the example they receive is fractured, inconsistent, or repeatedly interrupted, the lessons they carry forward can be just as unstable. What looks from the outside like poor decision-making may, in many cases, be the emotional residue of years spent adapting to chaos. That is why the story is not only about one man's mistakes or one man's recovery. It is also about what happens inside a home while the public watches the headlines.
T.I. pulls up to his gated community. They can't get in because the guard controlling the gate is asleep. Mr. Tip proceeds to wake him up, and let's just say this guard was definitely caught off guard, because he refused to open the gate for T.I. without seeing ID. T.I. got a little frustrated with that, which led to the guard calling the cops on Tip. Once the cops pulled up, they word for word said that T.I. was drunk as shit. Not only did they not care that the guard was sleeping, but they ended up arresting T.I. for disorderly conduct.
It is about the child in the background, the one who is not standing at the podium, not speaking in court, not shaping the public narrative. That child is still living every consequence in real time. Redemption, no matter how genuine, does not rewind childhood. It cannot return lost years. It cannot restore the bedtime conversations that never happened, or the ordinary moments that should have built trust and connection. Once those years are gone, they are gone. A person can become better, wiser, and more responsible, but the child who lived through the absence still carries that history. So while T's transformation deserves acknowledgement, the deeper reality remains impossible to ignore. A father may rebuild his life, a family may survive, a public image may recover, yet somewhere in that same story is a little boy who spent some of the most important years of his life waiting for the front door to open, hoping the person he needed most would finally come home.
And when that kind of absence becomes part of a child's foundation, the consequences can stretch far beyond the moment itself. They can shape identity, relationships, and choices for years to come. That is the cruelest part of all. One person can change,
but the shadow left on a child may last much longer. Maybe this all started as something much quieter than rebellion. Beneath the headlines and viral clips, there may have been a private need to make sense of the life his father came from. If the street shaped his dad's story, it's easy to imagine the next thought. Maybe the only way to understand that story is to step into that environment yourself. Maybe surviving it becomes a kind of proof. That appears to be the road King Harris started heading down. By the time he reached his teenage years, the warning signs were no longer subtle. Anyone watching closely could see a pattern beginning to form. What might have been written off once as a rough moment here or there was starting to look like something more consistent, something that kept pulling him into public controversy. One of the earliest major incidents came in 2020. At the time, King was around 15 or 16 years old and attending Dutchtown High School in Hampton, Georgia. Footage surfaced showing him involved in a fight inside a school bathroom. On its own, it was the kind of clash that might have stayed local, the sort of school drama that usually fades after a few days. Yet for King Harris, that was never going to happen. Because of who his parents are, the clip didn't remain just another teenage altercation. It exploded online. Suddenly, what should have been a private disciplinary issue became national content. Blogs picked it up, social media ran with it. News outlets framed it as more than a fight between students. In the public eye, he wasn't simply a teenager making a bad decision. He was the son of T.I. and Tiny, and that changed everything.
Every report seemed to tie his name directly back to his parents. Each new post or headline turned one difficult moment into a family story. Instead of the focus staying on a young person going through a messy stage, attention shifted to what his behavior supposedly said about the household he came from. That pressure alone would be hard for most teenagers to carry. In his case, it played out with millions of people watching. Still, that wasn't the last incident to draw attention. Another moment arrived in May 2022. And this one pushed the conversation even further. Video from a local Waffle House captured King Harris in a tense argument with several employees. The dispute reportedly started after his order came out with pickles he did not want. On paper, that sounds minor, almost laughably small. In reality, it became another highly visible flashpoint. King was 17 at the time, and what caught people off guard wasn't just the disagreement itself. It was the way the entire situation unfolded. For someone raised around fame, money, and access, many people expected a level of restraint, or at least enough distance to avoid turning a minor mistake into a spectacle. Instead, the opposite happened. Rather than letting the situation cool off, he documented it himself. He went live on Instagram and captured the confrontation as it happened. That choice changed the tone immediately. Once a phone is out and the audience is invited in, the moment stops being a private disagreement and becomes a performance under pressure. Every word matters more. Every reaction gets replayed. What might have ended as a simple complaint at a restaurant became another viral episode attached to his name.
Ever woke up with a roach on your face?
Here, no, that's not the goal.
All right, then.
Died and his son King. All of this then popped off after King then sat up there and said he ain't have a silver spoon in his mouth. He grew up in a non-gated community. Well, Mr. Tip Harris, well, let's just say King's parents, had a totally different thing to say. They was asking him had he ever woke up with roaches in his ear, all this.
That detail matters because it says a lot about the space he seemed to be operating in. These weren't just unfortunate events that happened around him. In some cases, he appeared willing to meet conflict head-on, even with the cameras rolling. For a teenager already carrying a famous last name, that kind of decision guaranteed one thing. The internet would make sure the moment followed him long after it ended. There's also something striking about how ordinary the trigger was. A food order being wrong is a common annoyance. Most people complain, ask for it to be fixed, and move on. Here, though, a small frustration became another public chapter in an unfolding story about attitude, identity, and image. That contrast is part of why the clip gained so much traction. People weren't only reacting to the argument, they were reacting to what it seemed to represent. Viewed together, the school incident and the Waffle House dispute painted a picture the public couldn't ignore. Two separate moments, two different settings, but the same larger concern. A young man repeatedly landing in situations that reinforced a growing reputation for confrontation. Fair or not,
Once that image starts forming online, it becomes incredibly difficult to shake. The reality is that celebrity children often get judged more harshly than everyone else. Mistakes that would stay small for other teenagers become national talking points for them. Every misstep is magnified. Every emotional moment gets treated like a character assessment. Yet even with that in mind, these episodes still raised real questions, not because they were shocking on their own, but because they suggested a larger struggle playing out in public.
At the center of it all was a contradiction people couldn't stop talking about. King Harris came from extraordinary privilege, but some of his actions seemed aimed at proving he could move through conflict the hard way. That tension made the story especially compelling. To outside observers, it looked like someone growing up in comfort while also reaching for a harsher image tied to survival, toughness, and credibility. Whether that came from confusion, pressure, imitation, or a desire to understand his father's background, the result looked the same from the outside. The pattern kept building. One viral clip became another. One incident fed the next. Before long, the public wasn't watching isolated moments anymore. They were watching a narrative take shape in real time. And that may be the most revealing part of this entire stretch of his life. None of these moments existed in a vacuum. Each one added another layer to the same question. Was King Harris simply acting out as a teenager under a spotlight? Or was he trying to become someone he believed he needed to be? Either way, the consequences were immediate. The internet had already started writing the story for him. A heated outburst unfolded, loaded with insults and reckless energy, until he climbed onto the counter and challenged an employee to a fight. Even after stepping outside, he kept the confrontation going, shouting more taunts and making a threat involving a weapon. Online reaction came fast and brutally. Social media users criticized him from every direction. Some didn't stop there either. They went after his family and filled the comment sections with relentless judgment. T.I.'s reaction, though, revealed a lot. Instead of delivering a dramatic speech or trying to win sympathy, he posted a calm video and questioned why his son's argument had become headline material in the first place. That response felt layered. On one side, it was clearly a father standing up for his child. On the other, it also suggested he understood his son had crossed the line. It was the response of a parent caught in an impossible space, wanting to shield his son while also realizing the public was watching every mistake in real time. By that point, King Harris was already dealing with legal trouble and growing criticism over the image he was building around himself. His public presence online leaned hard into a street-centered identity. The posts, the tone, the aggressive language, the constant confrontational attitude, it all painted a picture he seemed determined to project. During a conversation on Club Shay Shay with Shannon Sharp, T.I. offered his explanation for why his son had been acting out. According to him, King was pushing back against the idea of simply benefiting from the fame and accomplishments of his parents. T.I. repeated what King had said directly. "I just don't want to be a celebrity kid off of y'all's success. I don't want to." That statement says a lot. It points to a deeper frustration than just one public argument or one bad decision. For someone growing up in a famous household, every move gets judged differently. If you accept the privileges, people say you never earned anything. If you reject them in the wrong way, people say you're pretending to be something you're not. That kind of pressure can twist identity into performance.
I'm going to cut ties with King, and I'm going to apologize to 50 Cent. Just like he said, King really is a failure. I've solved too many problems for him, to the point where he started to believe that as long as I'm there to back him up, everything can keep going.
In King's case, the criticism grew because many people felt he was trying too hard to prove toughness. The persona he showed the world didn't just seem rebellious. It came across like a deliberate attempt to distance himself from the polished celebrity world he was born into. To some viewers, it looked like he was chasing authenticity in the loudest and most dangerous-looking way possible. That's what made the backlash so intense. The public wasn't just responding to one explosive moment in a store. They were reacting to a broader pattern they believed they were seeing. Every post, every caption, every confrontation added to that perception. Once the internet decides on a narrative, it rarely shows mercy. Still, T.I.'s explanation added an important layer. He wasn't saying his son's behavior was acceptable. He was pointing to the motivation underneath it. In his view, this was a young man struggling with the burden of inheritance, trying to carve out an identity that didn't feel borrowed. That doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does explain why the situation may have become more complicated than people wanted to admit. Fame creates a strange kind of pressure inside a family. The world assumes celebrity children have everything handed to them, but that same privilege can become its own trap. Every attempt to stand apart gets compared to the parent. Every mistake becomes public. Every bad choice turns into content for millions of strangers to debate. For King Harris, that meant personal missteps weren't staying personal. They were becoming viral moments, headlines, and punchlines. Instead of quietly learning from mistakes, he was doing it in front of an audience eager to judge him. That kind of environment can make rebellion even louder, especially when someone feels like they're fighting to be seen as more than just somebody's son. So when T.I. responded the way he did, it didn't come off as simple denial. It looked more like a father trying to reduce the spectacle, even while understanding the damage had already been done. He wasn't blind to what happened. He just seemed unwilling to let the internet define his son entirely by one ugly moment. At the center of all this is a familiar tension, a young man desperate to claim his own name, and a father watching that struggle play out under a spotlight neither of them can turn off. Living in someone else's spotlight can feel less like a privilege and more like a sentence. T.I. said something in that moment that landed with equal parts compassion and harsh reality. King wants a fresh start. T.I.'s response was blunt. That kind of reset is not available to him. He was born into this. There is no returning it, no handing it back, no stepping outside of it as if it never happened. That exchange captures the entire conflict in a painfully simple way. On one side, there is a young man trying to figure out who he is without being reduced to his father's reputation. On the other, there is a father making it clear that the world does not work that way. The last name, the public image, the years spent in front of cameras starting at just 7 years old, all of it attached itself to King long before he was old enough to understand what fame really meant. By the time he could read and process how people saw him, that image had already been built for him. Nothing about that is easy to escape. A person can change. A person can mature. A person can want distance from the version of themselves the public thinks it knows. Yet when that identity was created so early and so publicly, separating from it becomes incredibly difficult. That is the real sadness at the center of this story. It is not just about rebellion or family tension. It is about growing up inside a narrative that was written before you ever got a chance to speak for yourself.
Meanwhile, the legal problems continue to pile up. In September 2022, King was arrested on charges that included driving without wearing a seatbelt. That incident added to an already troubling pattern. Before that, he had also been arrested over allegations involving an altercation with a Waffle House employee. At that point, T.I. was no longer softening his words. He spoke publicly and made it clear that he saw the situation as serious. His message was direct and impossible to misunderstand. If King kept going down that road, prison was where it would lead. There was no humor in it, no attempt to make the moment lighter than it was. It sounded like a father watching consequences move closer and realizing the warnings had become urgent. He also made another point that mattered. According to T.I., he did try to correct and guide his son while raising him. He did try to instill discipline. He did what he believed a parent was supposed to do. Still, there comes a point when those decisions are no longer in a parent's hands. That, he said, was where things stood now. The choices belong to King. That is what makes the whole situation feel so heavy. Fame shaped the environment. Family name shaped expectations. Public scrutiny magnified every mistake. Even so, responsibility eventually becomes personal. T.I.'s message seemed to be that influence can only go so far. Advice can be given. Warnings can be repeated. Structure can be provided. After that, the path a person takes is their own. For King, that creates a brutal contradiction. He wants the chance to define himself, but he is trying to do it while carrying a name the public already associates with a certain image. Every move gets interpreted through that lens. Every setback becomes bigger because of who his father is. Every attempt to stand apart risks turning into another headline that pulls him right back into the same shadow he says he wants to escape.
T.I.'s perspective, while difficult to hear, came across as deeply resigned. He was not speaking as someone who believed a clever fix still existed. He sounded like someone who understood that some circumstances cannot be erased, only managed. You can wish for privacy. You can want reinvention. You can hope people will meet you without preconceived ideas. Yet once a public identity has been established that early and under that much attention, it tends to stay with you. That is why the moment hit so hard. It was not simply a disagreement between father and son. It was a collision between desire and reality. King wants independence. T.I. is saying independence does not erase history. It does not remove the weight of a famous last name. It does not wipe away years of exposure or the consequences of recent decisions. As the arrest kept adding up, the conversation became less about image and more about direction. The issue was no longer just whether King could step out on his own. It was whether he would make choices that allowed him to build something stable at all. T.I.'s warning made that painfully plain. There was still a chance to change course, but not if the same behavior continued. In the end, that may be the hardest truth in this entire situation. King did not choose the spotlight he was born into. He did not choose the public identity formed around him as a child. Those things were handed to him. What he does choose now, however, is how he responds to them. And according to T.I., that decision can no longer be made for him. He had already been disciplined in every way a parent could think of. Every punishment, every warning, every hard lesson had been tried. At some point, all the father can do is watch and hope his son chooses a different path. The real heartbreak begins when a parent sees his child heading straight toward the very same drop he once tumbled over himself and suddenly realizes he may not have the power to pull him back. That tension exploded into public view in November 2023 during the Atlanta Falcons and New Orleans Saints game. The Harris family was there together, but what should have been a simple outing quickly turned into one of the most talked about family moments they had ever had in public. Cameras were rolling, phones were up, and within moments, a private family disagreement had turned into a viral spectacle. The center of it all was T.I. and his son, King Harris. What made the moment even bigger was the fact that it was unfolding live. King was on Instagram Live in front of thousands of viewers when the disagreement started to heat up. People weren't hearing about it afterward through clips and secondhand retellings. They were watching it happen as it unfolded, raw and unfiltered, in real time. The argument focused on one issue that had clearly been building for a long time: King's upbringing. During the game, King spoke on live video while going back and forth with both of his parents. His version of events was very different from theirs. He said he was not brought up in the kind of luxury people assumed. Instead, he claimed that his grandmother played the biggest role in raising him. That statement immediately became the spark that lit the entire exchange. T.I. and Tiny did not agree with that description at all. Right there, in front of everyone, they challenged what King was saying. Their response was direct. From their perspective, he absolutely grew up with privilege, access, and opportunities that most people never see. They were not about to let the public believe he came from struggle in the way he was suggesting. That clash quickly became known as the silver spoon argument.
At its core, this wasn't just a disagreement about memories. It was really a fight over identity. T.I.'s position was clear. He was telling his son that he entered life with advantages. There was wealth around him. There were doors open to him from day one. There was a lifestyle available to him that many children could only imagine. In T.I.'s eyes, denying that reality made no sense. King, however,
his ass going to prison. If you goddamn keep this shit up, his ass going to prison. Ain't no way around it. Ain't nothing I'm gonna be able to do about it. Can't nobody stop it but him. You know what I mean? I've already had the conversation. I've already made my peace with it.
Did not simply accept that version. He pushed back hard. From his point of view, the story was more complicated than people wanted to admit. He seemed determined to argue that what the public saw on the outside did not fully explain what his life actually felt like on the inside. That is where the situation became so gripping to watch. This was not just about money. It was about perception, resentment, family roles, and the gap between what parents believe they provided and what a child feels he experienced. That is why the clip spread so fast. Viewers were not just reacting to a celebrity family having an argument. They were seeing something familiar underneath all the fame. A son insisting that his truth was being overlooked. Parents refusing to let their efforts be erased. A father trying to remind his child of the opportunities he had. A young man trying to explain that material comfort and personal reality are not always the same thing. Those kinds of conflicts happen in homes everywhere. The only difference here
was that this one played out in front of the internet. There was also something deeply emotional about T.I.'s role in the moment. He did not look like a man casually debating semantics. He looked like a father frustrated by what he saw as revisionist history, but also worried about where his son's mindset might lead. When a parent feels like a child is rejecting both guidance and gratitude at the same time, the reaction is rarely calm. It usually comes out with sharpness, pain, and urgency. That seemed to be the energy behind the exchange.
King's side carried its own intensity. He was not backing down, and that defiance was part of what made the moment so charged. He appeared committed to standing on his version of his childhood, even while his parents rejected it in front of a massive audience. That kind of public resistance can instantly turn a family disagreement into something bigger, because now pride gets involved. Once that happens, nobody wants to retreat. Each side starts fighting not only for their feelings, but for their credibility. The setting made it even more surreal. This was happening at an NFL game, surrounded by noise, fans, and the chaotic energy of a live event. In almost any other environment, maybe the conversation would have stayed private. Maybe it would have cooled off. Instead, it erupted in a place where emotions were already high and attention was easy to grab. Add a live stream on top of that, and the moment had all the ingredients to become internet history. What people kept circling back to was the central accusation. Was King trying to distance himself from the life he was born into, or was he trying to express something deeper about how he was raised? That question sat at the heart of the entire dispute. T.I. saw a son refusing to acknowledge his blessings. King appeared to see himself as someone whose story could not be reduced to wealth and status. That difference is what made the exchange feel bigger than a simple family spat. It touched on image, public expectation, and the complicated pressure that comes with growing up in a family household. From the outside, privilege looks obvious. Inside the family, though, relationships can still be messy, emotional, and full of unresolved tension. Access does not automatically erase conflict. Opportunity does not guarantee peace. A well-known last name does not stop a child from feeling misunderstood, or a parent from feeling unappreciated. By the time the moment spread across social media, it had become much more than an argument at a football game. It became a snapshot of a father and son colliding over truth, memory, and responsibility. T.I. was essentially saying, "You had more than most." King was answering with a challenge, insisting that his lived experience was not that simple. And that is why people could not stop watching. What viewers saw on television about his early life was very different from the version he says was real. According to King, the picture presented to the public did not reflect what he truly experienced growing up. He pushed back on the idea that he was raised in that large home, and he challenged the storyline that his grandmother was the one who brought him up. From there, the conversation took an even more uncomfortable turn. Tiny brought up a deeply personal detail, claiming that King still used a pacifier until he was 12. What might have started as family tension quickly became something much bigger because the moment did not stay private. It unfolded in front of cameras in a stadium with a live audience nearby and thousands of people following it online. The atmosphere shifted fast. T.I. then grabbed his son in a headlock and told him he was humiliating himself and the family. He also warned him that he could not challenge him. It was a striking scene, especially because it happened so publicly, with no chance to quietly step away from the spotlight. Afterward, King responded the way many young public figures do now, directly on social media. His message was emotional, blunt, and impossible to ignore. He wrote, "I stand on business. Don't give a fake who you are. I'm a grown man now. If I'm a mistake, say that. Stop making the world think you F with me when you don't." One line in particular stood out more than anything else. "If I'm a mistake, say that." That statement landed with real weight. It sounded less like a typical online outburst and more like a young man publicly wrestling with something far more painful. At just 19 years old, King appeared to be asking a devastating question in front of the entire internet. Do his own parents truly accept him? Or is the image of family unity only something shown when the cameras are rolling? That is what made the moment resonate beyond ordinary celebrity drama. This was not just a disagreement between relatives. It became a public unraveling of trust, identity, and the gap between private feelings and public presentation. The family many viewers had watched on screen suddenly looked far more complicated than the polished version people thought they knew. For anyone watching, the contrast was hard to miss. On one side, there was the carefully shaped image of support, success, and togetherness. On the other, there was King openly questioning whether that support was genuine. His post suggested that the affection presented to the public may not have matched what he felt behind closed doors. That possibility changed the way people looked at everything that came before it. Comments that might once have been dismissed as heated words now seemed to point to a deeper fracture. The embarrassment of a public argument was one thing. A son hinting that he feels unwanted is something else entirely. As the dust from that confrontation lingered, the situation did not simply fade away. Instead, the family drama appeared to move into even more serious territory. Less than a year later, in October 2024, the story took another major turn when King was arrested.
In Dunwoody, Georgia, King was stopped by police while behind the wheel of a BMW. According to officers, the traffic stop happened after he pulled out of a gas station and came close to striking a patrol vehicle. That moment alone drew immediate attention, but the situation escalated once law enforcement made contact. As the officer walked up to the car, they said they noticed the smell of marijuana. They also discovered that Harris had a firearm holstered on his hip. From there, the encounter quickly shifted from a routine stop into something much more serious. The arrest itself was tied to a failure to appear in court, but that warrant did not come out of nowhere. It traced back to an earlier case from August 2022. In that previous incident, he had been charged with speeding, knowingly operating a vehicle while his license was suspended, and driving under the influence of drugs. Those allegations were already significant on their own. Now, with a missed court date added to the picture, the latest arrest carried even more weight. What made the timing feel especially striking was what was happening in his personal life at the very same moment. King was reportedly on the verge of becoming a father. Earlier that same month, T.I. had publicly shared that his son was expecting his first child. That detail changed the tone of the story completely. This was no longer just about another legal setback. It was unfolding during a major life transition, one that usually signals maturity, responsibility, and a fresh chapter. Instead, the headlines painted a very different image. A baby on the way, a firearm at his side, an active warrant, a BMW involved in a near collision with a police cruiser. Put together, those details created a picture that was difficult to ignore. The contrast was impossible to miss, and it practically told its own story without needing much commentary.
T.I., in his own familiar style, appeared to lean on humor as a way to handle the frustration. Speaking about his often discussed middle child, he made a joke that he would raise the coming baby to give King the same kind of trouble King had given him. He even said, "I promise you there will be an indictment in this young one." The line was delivered as comedy, but the choice of words stood out immediately. Even as a joke, hearing a father use the word indictment while talking about his son's child landed with unusual force. It sounded playful on the surface, yet there was clearly something heavier underneath it. The remark suggested exhaustion, disappointment, and maybe even a sense of irony about how patterns seem to repeat themselves across generations. That is what made this moment feel larger than a simple celebrity arrest item. It had the elements of a legal story, a family story, and a coming-of-age story all tangled together.
We are getting our first-hand look at body camera footage showing the arrest of 21-year-old King Harris, the son of rapper T.I., taken into custody over the weekend by Gwinnett County Police after they say he was speeding, going 65 and a 45 in this Tesla Cybertruck. When they pulled him over, they saw there was a handgun on the dashboard. They asked him to step out, but Harris refused multiple times. At one point, he said he didn't feel safe.
On one side, there was the public image, flashing headlines, police reports, and a familiar last name drawing attention. On the other, there was the private reality of a young man about to step into fatherhood while still dealing with unresolved consequences from his past. For viewers watching from the outside, the details were dramatic enough on their own. Still, the emotional center of the story may have been that uncomfortable overlap between adulthood arriving and accountability still catching up. That tension is what gave the incident so much weight. The stop in Dunwoody was not just another traffic encounter. It became a snapshot of where King's life appeared to be in that moment, pulled between responsibility and recklessness, between a new beginning and old problems that had not yet gone away. One line about a future grandchild, tossed out like a joke,
reveals far more than it seems. It points to a pattern this family has been struggling to break for years.
T.I. had already publicly checked King in a clip that sprayed all over the internet. During a music video shoot, the younger artist was seen holding a gun, creating an image that immediately sparked concern. King pushed back, arguing that simply possessing a firearm was not against the law. His father's response went much deeper than legality. He made it clear that the issue was the way King was presenting himself and the kind of life he appeared to be glorifying. To T.I., it did not look clean, credible, or responsible. From there, the message became even more serious. He told him plainly that this kind of image is never free. It carries a price. Every choice, every performance, every attempt to look dangerous can bring consequences that last far beyond one moment on camera. That warning hit harder because it came from someone who understood the subject better than almost anyone. T.I. also questioned why the younger generation kept leaning so heavily into that energy when there were so many other stories they could tell. He wondered why they were not making music about love, relationships, and the people in their lives. Why focus only on the hardest version of reality when there are other emotions, other experiences, and other ways to connect with listeners? That is what makes this so striking. Here is a man whose own name became tied to trap music, now urging his son not to turn those lyrics into a real-life blueprint. There is something deeply heavy about that. It is not just a father criticizing a son. It is a man staring directly at the unintended aftermath of a culture he helped shape and trying to stop it from taking hold in his own home.
That is the burden of generational fallout. One generation creates a language for survival, ambition, pain, and status. The next generation grows up surrounded by that language and sometimes mistakes it for a set of instructions. By the time the warning comes, the image has already settled in. The lifestyle has already been romanticized. The performance has started to feel like identity. What makes King Harris such a difficult figure to watch is that his story never feels completely lost, but it never feels fully secure either. There is always a sense that things could go in two totally different directions. In one moment, he seems like a young man caught in the pressure of image, ego, and expectation. In the next, he looks like someone who might still step away from all of it and choose something better. That uncertainty is what makes his situation so emotional. This is not a story where hope disappeared a long time ago. Hope is still there. It just never stays steady. It flashes on, then fades. It returns just when it seems to be gone. With King, you are constantly left wondering which version of him will show up next, the one chasing a reckless persona or the one capable of growing beyond it. By the middle of 2024, there were at least some signs that things might be shifting in a better direction. The mood around King Harris seemed to suggest that change was possible. After so many public moments filled with tension, criticism, and concern, that possibility mattered. It did not erase what came before. It did not guarantee a clean turnaround. Still, it hinted that the story was not finished yet, and that may be the most important part of all. His story is painful precisely because it still feels unfinished. There is no final answer yet, no simple label that fully explains who he is going to become. What exists instead is a young man standing between two paths, with the world watching closely and his family clearly aware of what is at stake.
Every warning from his father carries extra weight because it is not coming from a distance. It is coming from experience. It is coming from someone who knows how easily entertainment can blur into real consequences when the message gets too close to the life. That is why those words land so hard. They are not abstract. They are personal, direct, and rooted in hard-earned understanding. In many ways, King Harris represents something larger than himself. He reflects the tension between image and reality, between performance and consequence, between inherited culture and individual choice. That is why people keep paying attention, not just because of who his father is, but because the struggle itself feels so familiar. It's about what happens when the stories one generation tells become the pressures the next generation has to survive. So when T.I. challenged him, it was not merely a viral parenting moment. It was a warning flare. It was a father trying to interrupt a cycle before it tightened any further. Whether that message fully gets through remains uncertain. What is clear is that the concern behind it is real, and the stakes are much bigger than one video, one lyric, or one headline.
That is why this story stays with people. It is not only about conflict, it is about possibility. Even with all the public tension, all the criticism, and all the mixed signals, there is still a chance for this to become a story about growth instead of decline. By mid-2024, that chance was still alive, and maybe, just maybe, becoming easier to see. Recent headlines have painted a very different picture of King. Instead of being linked to conflict and controversy, he's now being recognized for signs of real personal growth and a more grounded attitude. The shift has been noticeable, especially to people who have followed his public journey over the years.
A major moment came during an open and honest discussion on the Me and Halo YouTube series featuring T.I. and 2 Chainz. In that conversation, King spoke directly about how he was raised, the weight of responsibility, and the direction he wants for his life. What stood out most was the tone. Rather than leaning into the street-centered image that had shaped much of his teenage reputation, he seemed to be stepping away from it. His words felt more focused and more mature. He made it clear that he doesn't want to rely on others or coast through life without building something for himself. One of the strongest points he made was simple but powerful. He wants his own home, his own independence, and his own foundation. That message landed with a lot of people. Viewers picked up on the change immediately. Support poured in from fans who saw his comments as a sign that he was thinking differently and growing into a new chapter. For many, it wasn't just about what he said. It was about what those words represented. They suggested someone trying to leave behind old habits and take ownership of his future. At the same time, the relationship between King and T.I. appears to have improved. The two have seemingly found common ground after periods of public tension, and that reconciliation has become part of the larger story surrounding King's evolution. Their father-son dynamic has long attracted attention, but now the conversation seems less focused on friction and more centered on understanding. Another major turning point appears to have been fatherhood. Since welcoming his son, King Jr., King has seemed more reflective and more intentional. Becoming a parent often changes how people see themselves, and in his case, many observers believe it has pushed him toward greater maturity. The responsibilities that come with raising a child may have helped reshape his priorities in a very visible way.
That sense of growth carried into a 2025 podcast appearance, where King gave a memorable and surprisingly intense description of his relationship with T.I. He said the bond between them had reached a point where they understood each other deeply, almost instinctively. Still, he admitted that the dynamic could be complicated. To explain it, he compared their relationship to Ghost and Tariq from Power. Anyone familiar with the Starz series knows that is not a light comparison. The connection between those two characters was defined by tension, mistrust, and a constant clash between father and son. By the end of the story, that conflict reaches its most devastating point. Because of that, King's analogy immediately caught attention. It was dramatic, layered, and impossible to ignore. At the same time, he recognized how serious the comparison sounded. He understood the weight behind using those characters to describe something so personal. Even so, his explanation suggested he wasn't trying to make a shocking statement just for reaction. Instead, he seemed to be using a well-known TV relationship to express how complicated, emotional, and deeply charged things had sometimes felt between him and his father. That level of honesty is part of what made the interview stand out. It wasn't polished in a way that felt artificial. It came across as someone trying to describe a difficult bond with language people would immediately understand.
The moment I got there, I knew this was no longer just a young man making a mistake. This case isn't over legally. I paid $4,545 to bail him out, but at the scene, I didn't see fear in him, and I didn't see real reflection. There was even a sense of emotional resistance. That's when I realized for the first time that he had started to treat rules as something he can challenge.
And whether viewers agreed with the comparison or not, it revealed just how intense that father-son history has been. Taken together, these recent moments have created a very different narrative around King. The image now is less about rebellion and more about reflection, less about chaos and more about change. He appears to be thinking seriously about independence, family, and the kind of life he wants to build from here.
For longtime observers, that shift is significant. Public figures often talk about growth, but audiences usually look for proof in the details: how someone speaks, what they prioritize, and whether their choices seem to reflect a new mindset. In King's case, many people believe they are starting to see exactly that. His recent comments didn't erase the past, and they weren't framed that way. Instead, they pointed toward a person who may finally be learning from it. That's what made the reaction so strong. People weren't just responding to a soundbite. They were responding to the possibility that he is truly moving into a more mature phase of his life. If that continues, this could mark the beginning of a major reset in how the public sees him. What once looked like a cycle of tension and bad press is now being replaced by a more thoughtful and more hopeful story. And for King, that may be the biggest headline of all. What he was really describing wasn't about harming anyone. In his view, it came down to feeling misunderstood and carrying a lot of built-up frustration. He made it clear that growth takes time, especially at his age. As he put it, he's still young, and becoming a different person doesn't happen overnight. King also explained that he could see where his father was coming from. He understood the irritation, the concern, and the pressure behind T.I.'s reaction. From King's perspective, his father had one main objective all along. He never wanted his son presenting himself with an image tied to the streets. T.I. wanted something different for him, something cleaner, something that didn't lean into that reputation.
At the same time, King had his own point to make. Deep down, what he seemed to be asking for was acknowledgement. More than anything, he wanted his father to recognize that he had put in work on his own terms. He wasn't looking to have everything connected back to his family name or dismissed as something handed to him. In his mind, he had been out there building his own lane, making his own moves, and proving himself independently. What bothered him was the feeling that those efforts weren't being fully respected. That tension between father and son made the situation feel bigger than just a disagreement. It wasn't only about image. It was also about identity, pride, and the need to be seen for who he believes he is. On one side, there was a father trying to steer his son away from a path he didn't want for him. On the other, there was a young man pushing back, asking for credit and validation for what he believes he's accomplished. Not long after that, another explosive moment pulled King into an even more public spotlight. In early 2026, the situation involving 50 Cent erupted. What followed became one of those internet-heavy celebrity clashes that dominated timelines and sparked non-stop reactions throughout February. The conflict between T.I. and 50 Cent quickly became a major online spectacle. It wasn't just a quiet exchange of shots either. The Harris family got involved in a very visible way, with T.I. and his sons, Domani and King, releasing multiple diss tracks aimed directly at 50. The feud grew fast, and every new post, song, or response added more fuel to it. King stepped deeper into that battle after 50 Cent shared an unflattering picture of Tiny on Instagram. That post appears to have pushed things to another level for him. In response, King dropped a diss track titled Main Made Man and backed it up with sharp messages across social media. He wasn't subtle, and he clearly wanted his side of the issue to be heard.
Still, there was a line that many felt crossed. During the feud, King wore a shirt featuring 50 Cent's late mother. That decision immediately drew attention for all the wrong reasons. Even T.I., who was already involved in the larger conflict, publicly made it known that he thought it had gone too far. His reaction was direct. T.I. said that the moment he saw the shirt, he felt it had crossed the limit. For him, that was where things needed to stop. In the middle of a loud, messy public dispute, he still recognized that certain things shouldn't be dragged into the exchange. That detail mattered because it showed a contrast inside the feud itself. While the back and forth had already become highly publicized and emotionally charged, T.I. still seemed to draw a boundary when the situation touched something deeply personal. Even in a rap rivalry, he appeared to be saying there are some areas that should remain off limits. The entire episode added another complicated chapter to King's public image. On one hand, he was trying to show that he could stand on his own, speak for himself, and move independently. On the other, moments like this made the criticism louder and gave people more reasons to question his judgment. For someone already fighting to be seen as his own person, that kind of controversy only made the spotlight harsher. What made it even more intense was how public all of it became. None of this played out quietly behind the scenes. It happened in front of fans, blogs, social platforms, and endless commentary. Every move was picked apart. Every response became part of the narrative. In that kind of environment, even one decision can completely shift how people view the entire situation.
At the center of it all, the same themes kept showing up again and again. Respect, recognition, family tension, and public perception. King wanted credit for carving out his own path.
T.I. wanted his son to avoid embracing an image he felt would do more harm than good. Then the 50 Cent feud poured gasoline on everything, turning a personal struggle over identity and respect into a much bigger, much messier public conversation. And once that happened, the story stopped being just about private frustration between father and son. It became a full-scale public drama, with music, social media, and family loyalty all colliding at once. T.I. has said he respected the way both of his sons stood up for their mother. Even with that pride, though, he made one thing obvious. There was nothing enjoyable about watching his children get pulled into public conflict. That is the emotional balancing act he has seemed to live with for a long time. The pride of seeing your son stay loyal to family, paired with the worry of what that loyalty might push him toward. That complicated dynamic surfaced again in April 2026 after a comment from T.I. spread everywhere online. He had revealed that his son asks for $100,000 in a way that sounded almost casual, as if that kind of number were ordinary. Once the clip started making the rounds, King stepped in to explain what was really behind those conversations. According to him, when he goes to his father for money, he is not just asking to spend for the sake of spending. He says those talks are tied to business ideas, investments, and opportunities meant to create something bigger. In his version of the story, the six-figure figure was never about indulgence. It was about trying to build.
At the same time, he has been trying to carve out an identity of his own in music. Performing under the name Kids, he recently released a new project titled Allergen. On paper, that sounds like a straightforward next step. A young artist stepping into his career, shaping a brand, and trying to prove he is more than the headlines attached to his family. Yet the deeper story around King Harris is far more complicated than a single release or one viral moment. The sadness in his story does not come from one dramatic turning point. It comes from the pressure of living inside a constant push and pull. There is the version of him he may have been told to be from the beginning. There is the version the public and the cameras turned into a character. Then there is the person he has likely been trying to discover for himself underneath all of it. Those three versions do not always match, and that disconnect can wear on someone day after day. He grew up in a home filled with status and visibility, yet there is a sense that it may not have ever felt fully like his own space. He was raised in an environment shaped by fame, expectations, and the constant presence of an audience. Before he was even old enough to fully understand the world around him, he had already seen his father leave for prison. That kind of absence lands early. It becomes part of the foundation of childhood before a child can even explain what it means. On top of that, his life was not simply lived. It was shown, watched, turned into content for people who did not know him but felt free to judge him anyway. Growing up is already messy and private. Growing up while millions of people feel entitled to define you is something else entirely. Every awkward stage, every mistake, every attempt to find independence can become a public discussion before you even know who you are.
That is why the story around him feels less like one scandal and more like a long identity struggle happening in real time. Family loyalty, money, ambition, public pressure, and image all collide at once. One moment, he is being framed as a son defending his family. The next, he is a viral topic because of a money conversation. Then, he is an artist trying to be taken seriously on his own terms. Each version competes with the others, and the public often picks whichever one is easiest to react to.
And let me tell you, T.I. wasn't about to sit back and take that criticism lying down. He jumped on social media faster than a hot gossip spreads and posted this passionate video response to all the backlash. He was practically begging people to stop flooding his inbox with messages about King, insisting that he knows his son better than anyone else in this world.
The $100,000 story is a perfect example of that. A number that large immediately grabs attention, especially when it is linked to the child of a celebrity. People hear it and assume recklessness, entitlement, or excess. King's response was meant to redirect that narrative. He wanted it understood as strategy, not impulse. Whether people accept that explanation or not, his point was clear. He sees those discussions as connected to future plans, not just luxury. Still, even that clarification says something larger about the environment he comes from. In many families, asking a parent for help is private. In his world, it becomes a headline. A personal conversation can quickly become a meme, a debate, or a character judgment. That kind of spotlight does not just distort events, It also makes self-definition harder because every explanation has to fight through an image that may already be fixed in the public mind. His music career, especially under the Kid Cyan name, feels like part of that fight for control. Releasing Ogen is not just a creative move, it is also a statement that he wants to be seen as someone making his own plays. Whether listeners connect with the project or not, the attempt matters because it shows a desire to shape his future instead of simply being reduced to someone else's storyline.
What makes his situation resonate is how human it is beneath the celebrity layer. Many young people struggle with the difference between who their family thinks they are, who the world assumes they are, and who they want to become. In his case, that same struggle is just happening under brighter lights and harsher scrutiny. The conflict is more visible, but the feeling is familiar. So when people look at King Harris, the real story may not be one explosive downfall or one defining incident. It may be this slow, exhausting collision between inheritance, image, and identity. A son trying to honor his family, a public figure trying to outrun a reputation, a young man trying to become himself, while the world keeps telling him who he is supposed to be. Long before he could grasp what celebrity really costs, King Harris was already living inside a spotlight seen by millions. He carries his father's exact legal name, along with every expectation, comparison, and burden attached to it. Now he's a father too, facing the kind of responsibility that asks a hard question. Can he stop a pattern that was in motion long before he arrived? T.I. has faced his own very public legal troubles over the years, including arrests tied to drugs and weapons, and he also spent time behind bars. That history didn't simply disappear. The environment that shaped T.I. never fully released its grip. And today, that same pull seems to be reaching for his son as well.
Even with all the privilege surrounding his name, King's upbringing wasn't built entirely inside luxury or distance from everyday life. He attended public school, and while his parents were away working, he spent meaningful time living with his grandmother. Those experiences gave him something important, a grounded, familiar connection to real life outside the celebrity bubble. It made him feel more recognizable, more human, more like someone viewers could understand, rather than just another famous kid raised behind gates and cameras. At the same time, he learned a lesson early that many people assume children in famous families never have to face. Having access to money is one thing. Understanding that it has to be earned is something else entirely. That idea appears to have been part of his foundation from the beginning. Still, a strong foundation only matters if it can hold under pressure, and pressure has followed King for most of his life. Now the real uncertainty begins. Can the progress he's made actually last? Is reconciliation something solid? Or is it only temporary calm before the next public setback? Will becoming a father change the way he sees himself and the choices in front of him? Could music finally give him a sense of identity that belongs to him alone, instead of one constantly measured against the legacy of his family name? Those questions hang over everything.
What makes King Harris's story so complicated is not simply the idea of failure. In many ways, that's too shallow an explanation. The deeper issue is the world he was born into. Fame came first. Cameras came early. Expectations arrived before maturity did. A powerful last name opened doors, but it also created a script that other people were eager to write for him. Add in the emotional distance that can come from a father being physically or mentally absent at key moments, plus the pressure of growing up inside a carefully managed public image, and the struggle starts to look less like a surprise and more like something he was pushed toward from the beginning. That is where the real tragedy sits. It isn't just about bad decisions or public mistakes. It's about what happens when a young person is raised inside a machine that constantly defines him before he can define himself. Every move gets watched. Every conflict becomes content. Every flaw gets amplified because his last name already means something to the public. Under those conditions, finding an identity isn't difficult in the normal sense. It can feel almost impossible. For King, the challenge has never been only about making the right choice. It has also been about figuring out which parts of his life are truly his. Is he living as himself, or reacting to a role handed to him by family history, public attention, and the expectations that come with both?
That kind of pressure can distort a person's sense of direction long before anyone notices the damage. Becoming a parent could become a turning point. Fatherhood has a way of forcing clarity on people who have spent years searching for it. It can turn vague ideas about growth into immediate responsibility. Suddenly, the cycle is no longer some abstract family pattern people talk about in interviews or online. It becomes personal. It becomes urgent. It becomes something staring back at him through his own child's future.
Music may be another possible path forward. For someone born into a famous household, creative work can become more than a career. It can become a claim to individuality. If he can build a voice that feels honest and separate from the image attached to his family, that might offer the sense of ownership he has been chasing. Not borrowed identity, not inherited status, something earned. Still, none of that happens automatically. A child, a reconciliation, or a music career does not instantly erase years of pressure, public scrutiny, or internal conflict. Real change has to survive attention, temptation, expectation, and history. That is the test in front of him. King Harris's story remains unfinished, and that may be the most important part. He has not reached a final verdict. He is still moving through the consequences of where he came from and trying to decide where he goes next. The weight on him is unusual, but the core of the struggle is familiar. Trying to become your own person while carrying a past you didn't create. Each time he tries to pull himself forward, all of those forces seem to pull back. Fame, family legacy, public judgment, and the environment that shaped the men before him. Whether he rises above that or gets dragged further into it is still unknown. What is clear, though, is that his story was never going to be simple. Before he ever had the chance to choose a direction, much of the pressure had already chosen him.
Every time it seems like King Harris is finally moving toward a better chapter, another headline pulls him straight back into the version of his life the public has already decided to believe. One moment, there is a sense of progress. The next, the same old narrative takes over again, louder than anything else. It becomes a loop that is hard to escape, especially when every move is watched and judged in real time. For someone trying to grow beyond a reputation, that kind of pressure can feel relentless. Changing course is one challenge. Convincing the world to see that change is another. In many ways, that may be the real battle King Harris is facing now. Not just moving forward, but breaking free from a story that keeps rewriting itself around him.